Welcome, everybody. Happy Friday afternoon. Thanks for coming by our panel. Today, we are going to be talking about navigating Minnesota's cannabis industry, regulations, app process, and operational considerations. Obviously, there is still a lot to be seen in the state of Minnesota, so we are just going to play it the way that we see it right now and talk about things as they go. So for the next 30 minutes, we're going to introduce ourselves quick. We're going to talk about how to prepare for an evolving licensing process. We're going to talk about things like setting a budget, understanding one-way and two-way door decisions, time management, talking about pro formas, and really doing your homework, knowing what's going to happen, and maybe a little bit of speculation, but we'll try to keep it from that because we know there's a lot of balls up in the air still. Real quick bios, I'll start myself. My name is Morem Waller. I am a CPA. I live here in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I am the CEO and co-founder of Morem Waller CPAs, and we are a full-service cannabis-based CPA firm that works with cannabis businesses around the country. Go to Ashley here.
My name is Ashley Pachilla. I'm the founder of Point 7 Group. We're a 100% women-owned consulting firm that's been working in cannabis for the last 10 years, and we're very excited to be here.
I'm Laylee Foddy. I'm partner and principal at Launch Strategies. We are a service person, only full service public affairs, strategic consultancy for the cannabis industry. We led the effort on legalization here in Minnesota, and now we work with clients and across the industry to stand up the Minnesota model.
Okay, great. Hi, I'm Allie Piscatelli. I'm the owner of Budding Operations. We're a regulatory compliance consulting firm, and we specialize in inventory control and the dreaded metric system.
So we're just going to go kind of panel style, but start with some questions here. So the number one question I think everyone's asking is what is going on in Minnesota, and that's extremely detailed to talk about. Laylee actually has her own panel where she's going to be digging into that in detail at 3:50 today. So I would highly recommend you go check that out. Room 211B, which I think is maybe next door. We're in 211A, I think, right now. So 3:50, and she's going to talk about how to successfully operate within Minnesota's unique cannabis policies. So that really deserves its own panel. So with that said, when we got together to think about this particular topic, we had a bunch of questions, and we wanted to kind of sum them down to a 30-minute presentation. And what's the first thing as we were talking? What are kind of the main components of a strong cannabis business? So I thought I'd start with you, Allie. Obviously, we have some thoughts here, but what are your thoughts on?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the first thing we thought was important to talk about was a thoughtful business strategy, right? And the biggest part of that is being realistic, okay? Being realistic about how much it costs to enter this market, depending on your license type, and creating an actionable plan, right? Whatever you're laying out in your business strategy are things that you're going to have to somehow execute. And you want to be realistic, right, about that, right? Not over-promising, especially if this was any sort of merit situation, and making sure that you have the team behind you to execute what this strategy might be. And then, of course, working within regulation. So when those are out, making sure that you're making these decisions based on what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. The next thought was a real estate strategy. So after you determine what license type you're going to go after, you need to start figuring out if you're going to lease a space or purchase a space, right? And also what size space that you're going to need to execute what you've laid out in your business strategy, right? You want to make sure that you have ample space to perform operations, but also that you maybe have room to grow depending on what license you're going after, right? Maybe it's production and you're starting with one extraction type and you want to add another one later. So making sure that you're thinking about your business strategy before you engage in any real estate commitments. The next one we had was building a diverse and professional team. And, you know, there's a lot of people across this country that have years of experience, right? And there's no reason to go at this alone. Also, depending on your license type or the size of your business, you might also consider fractional roles, right? We see that a lot from a compliance perspective or an accounting perspective. Because if you're a small mom and pop store, you might not have the finances or ability to have a full-time compliance person on your team, right? So building out who you have on your team, identifying what holes and gaps there are, and then trying to fill them in the most efficient way possible. The next one we had was strong financials. And you know what? I'm going to skip that one and let you answer it, Mark.
Okay.
You're more qualified. And then building meaningful relationships with the local government and the community. So this is a big one. A lot of people think after you apply and get your license, your relationship with these governing bodies is over, right? The local municipalities have as much right and power to enforce the law and inspect your business as the OCM will, right? So it's very important to build these relationships and make sure that your business is bringing a positive aspect to the community, and painting it in that light. So I don't know, Mark, you want to address the financials?
Yeah, really, at this stage of any business, you obviously want to conserve cash as much as possible, especially if we don't know exactly what the application process is going to look like. You don't know where you might be able to purchase property. You don't know, we just don't know enough to know that I would say go spend, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars right away, unless you absolutely know what's going on. So have a strong financial plan in mind. Don't, you know, take the first, you know, spend thousands of tens of thousands of dollars on things that you just don't know enough about yet. And then start thinking about having a strong financial base for your business. So those are all key components. And one more thing is cash is absolutely essential. So keep your cash. So I want to get to question 3. This is really an area that's when we were discussing before the panel, that Ashley had some really good thoughts on. So what should, as a cannabis business owner, be doing now to get your team organized? So Ashley, what do you think about?
Yeah, so we've talked to probably a few hundred groups since last July or August, and I think everyone at this conference is trying to figure out how to prepare for licensing, etc. The first piece of advice I have for you is to think less about the application and the licensing process and more about the operation that you're actually pursuing. And if you do that, you think about everything from, you know, payroll, how you're going to manage the operation, the tech you're going to use, etc. When and if, you know, an application comes out that requires you to present that information, you'll just, you know, reformat the decisions you've already made for purposes of the application. Far too often we see groups really oriented and hyper-focused on the app itself and the competitive nature of that. You know, here, obviously, we're talking about a lottery model, but prepare yourself for the business that you're pursuing and you stay focused on that because it will pay off and you'll be able to kind of adapt to whatever the parameters are in terms of the licensing process. Hand in hand with that, groups are asking us, you know, well, we want to prepare now. We don't want to get caught in our heels. We don't want to be behind. And so, but I wanted to emphasize there's kind of 2 buckets of decisions. One-way door decisions. These are things that are very hard or expensive to reverse. Buying a building, signing a long-term lease, signing a binding, you know, LOI, getting into a joint venture very quickly. You know, these are things that you really want to be careful about. And with the timeline that's still evolving, these are probably decisions that you do not want to be making now. Of course, there's exceptions to that. You know, there's special circumstances where someone might be pursuing, you know, real estate at this juncture. But for the vast majority of groups that at least we've spoken with, holding off on some of these, you know, very expensive, big binding decisions is probably very wise. 2-way door decisions. These are things that decisions you can make and you can reverse, change, etc. without a whole lot of additional expense. There's no reason now that you can't be talking with your business partners about the people that you intend to hire, the benefits that you want to offer. In my experience, those conversations also double as a good way of knowing if you and your partners see eye to eye on critical things like culture building and treatment of your employees, etc. So there's things, again, that you can absolutely be thinking about and pinning down whether or not the application requires you to present that information or not really shouldn't matter to you at this stage. You know, as a business owner, you have to have a handbook. You know, you have to have a plan for your staff. You will have to train them. So trying to focus on how you're going to do each of those required and critical business functions. Again, I think that's the smartest thing that you can be doing. And for a lot of you, you're trying to figure out how to manage your dollars and your time. Again, in a process that's changing and still very much evolving. So I think these are the kind of the best pieces of advice. Being at events like this, it's smart. Understand the legislation. Read. A lot of it is a lot of reading right now. And just try to do your best to stay current. There's a lot of information coming out quickly, and I know it's very difficult to kind of know up from down in terms of the process here and the dates that are coming up next.
Great. Anybody else have any thoughts on that?
I think that was awesome.
Alright. So question 4, should I be preparing for an application now? And I thought, Laylee, since you've been interested in the states, been integral in the state process, I thought you might want to talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think, in terms of preparing for an application, I think the guidance that Ashley is providing that, focusing on making sure that you're thinking through your business operationally, it's probably going to be some of the best preparation for you in terms of preparing for an application. The real refined details of what's going to be required in an application, those are not settled yet and are likely going to be things that are determined by the Office of Cannabis Management pursuant to rulemaking. But what we do know is that there is a strong emphasis on standing of a well-regulated industry as quickly as possible. And that means that if you're waiting for the application window to open before you start thinking about your application, yeah, you're probably waiting too long. The statute that passed last year includes in it a lot of those basic things that we know, even after rulemaking, these are going to be things that you're going to need to account for on an application. And the sooner you start thinking about them, the better. A lot of the things pertain to getting your personal finances in order, right? Like if your taxes are in arrears and things like that, get that stuff figured out now, figuring out, vetting your business partners and things like that to make sure that all the criteria are satisfied, looking at what your eligibility is in terms of applying for some of the proposed programs to accelerate or allow pre-market approval for social equity businesses. Beginning to look at what are the qualifications for that. And then the basic building blocks in terms of what you're going to need to demonstrate in terms of operational preparedness, having a security plan and all of these things, those are articulated in the statute. Those are basic things that in every state when you look at, it's really what regulators are going to be looking for. And I think start getting ready for that. I think one thing that folks, especially when they're looking at examples from other states, often get really preoccupied with is this, well, how am I going to show that I'm better and more experienced and have more money and all of this than the other people that are going to apply? And if that's your thinking going into this, then probably you're putting a little bit of that cart before the horse, because again, what OCM is going to be looking for is businesses that are demonstrating that they are operationally ready. And we're talking about what that means, especially in a market like this where we're setting up an industry where we're looking to have a diversity of a lot of different licensees What you may be thinking is the type of experience or credentials or pedigrees that the OCM is going to be looking for, you're probably wrong. They're not looking to, referee what is a good business plan versus a bad business plan. What they're looking for is, do you have a business plan that has the right components of a business plan that demonstrates that you have thought it through? Not whether, with the right degrees or the right number of experience in the legal industry. Keep in mind that one of our goals is to convert people from the legacy market over into the legal market. And so what preparation looks like, what experience looks like, what a background in this looks like, what a good strategy looks like. There's a lot of different permutations in that. And so just prepare, focus on the story and the components that are necessary for your business to be successful. And yeah, look at those statutory components as early as you can. And then, things like if you're looking at where to spend your money early on, talk to an accountant, talk to a lawyer as far as is necessary to make sure that we're just getting those predicates of the business set up correctly now, just because those are going to be things that are hard to change later. And then the rest of it, instead of sinking a bunch of money into a bunch of different consultants on a bunch of different things, focus on getting stuff operational.
So this is kind of for all of the panelists. How much will it cost to secure a license and what can I expect to earn? So Ashley, maybe you want to talk a little bit about what it might be like to secure a license. Obviously, we don't really know enough yet, but like in what you've seen in other states, the process has been like.
What teams spend really varies by license type and also varies by state. In states where there's a real estate requirement, sometimes there's a capital reserve requirement, you're going to see teams spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, $1 million. I mean, it's insane. And I think what the OCM is trying to do here is, remove some of those barriers to entry and criteria that really doesn't determine if someone is well equipped to run one of these businesses. I've worked with clients of every shape and size, and some of the most talented groups that I have encountered over the years, they're really good at their craft. Maybe they're not so great at documenting that well in a business plan. That's not really a good, determinant if that person's going to be hell of a grower or not, so I think the OCM is trying, and they're working through it. They're trying to figure out like how do you evaluate teams based on things that actually measure ability. So in terms of cost to prepare, that's a really personal decision for each team. I think best advice we have collectively is determine what your team is willing to invest in this process, both from a time perspective and a dollars perspective. And then, understand the timeline ahead, so you're able to kind of budget that out a little bit and, stick to that budget. If you know that figure, now you can be really discerning. To Lily's point, you're going to need legal. You're definitely going to want an accountant helping you set this up correctly from the beginning. Those mistakes will cost you tenfold to solve and try to change later. And if you're someone, that has some extra cash, you do need, some help. I'd say the one other big thing you could invest in now are financial models, so that you actually understand what your license is likely to do performance-wise. I don't think it's a secret to anyone in here that there's quite a few misconceptions about cannabis businesses, that we're all like rolling around in piles of cash, and it's not always the case. I get very frustrated when I hear the term generational wealth thrown around, because it's not that it's not possible, but most cannabis businesses are healthy small businesses. That does not mean that every license is worth millions and millions of dollars. There's of course situations where you see that, but I want everyone in here that's thinking about applying to be realistic. I think Allie said that very well earlier. About what the license is likely to do, and so the best way to do that is model it out, understand best case, worst case for the site, for the license that you're looking at. And then if those numbers are acceptable to you and they're enticing, you move forward from there. But I think that's one of the best investments you can make to kind of back your way into answering that question about cost.
Yeah. And I think to your point about pro formas and making sure that you have a pro forma set up, there are some very low hanging fruit things that we see when clients give us pro formas that oftentimes don't consider costs such as federal taxes, which for most businesses, if they're set up as corporations, they need to pay quarterly federal taxes. Just budgeting for sales tax. We see, if you are not paying close attention to your sales and filing sales tax returns on a timely basis, you may end up running low on cash. You can't just look at your bank account, for example, to say, this is how much cash I have once you're operational. You really need to be looking at your business as a whole, because we've definitely seen businesses get into cash crunches over things like sales tax, which are just part of your typical business. And then Allie and I work together quite a bit on with businesses that are in other states where the intersection of accounting and compliance comes into play. Allie, I wonder if you have thoughts on the cost of compliance and if you're not compliant, what that can look like.
Yeah, absolutely. So, compliance isn't going anywhere. The OCM might not knock on your door day one, but they will come, right? And the cost to backpedal any non-compliant things, a lot of non-compliant violations come with fees, right? Michigan's a great example. They're $10,000 per violation, and they gave out almost 400 violations last year. $10,000 could put a business under if you have to decide to pay the OCM or to pay your sales tax, right? So investing in compliance from the beginning is a great idea. And when you're building out your business, and obviously we don't have regulations right now, but taking compliance into consideration into all facets of your business, including marketing, right? I've seen a lot of great marketing plans, but they're illegal. So you just spend a lot of time and money working outside of the regulation. So if you can think through the lens of compliance when you're planning out how you're going to run your business, you shouldn't come up with a lot of obstacles down the road, right? It's also cheaper to pay for compliance assistance rather than somebody to help fix an error in the end, right? Another thing I wanted to mention, if that's okay, is I think Ashley's right. This is the best time to invest in a financial model because if you get a license, nobody's going to give you any money if you don't have a financial model. So then you're going to have to make one pretty quickly. And it's also a good realistic pulse check for you if this is something is feasible for you and that you want to do, because unfortunately being in this industry is not cheap. I wish it was, but it's not. There's a lot of requirements there.
And then Laylee, I wanted to ask you from your perspective, being in Minnesota, that there may be hemp specific businesses that may be looking for a Minnesota license. How do you see that conversion happening for Minnesota hemp people that are in the Delta 9 space right now?
Yeah, part of the impetus for creating that marketplace, that low-dose hemp-derived marketplace, was to create an on-ramp for the smaller Minnesota businesses to be able to establish their businesses, establish a brand, develop relationships with consumers, build out, your supply chain and your event, all of those things, and do it with the protections of, they come with working with a federally legal product, and then be capitalized when it comes time to make that conversion over into adult use or into the expanded market. And so, the entire, approach to legalization in this industry anticipated that you would have people crossing over from the hemp-derived marketplace over. And so we really saw that as being one of the biggest coups nationally when it comes to creating social equity opportunities, because largely we're going to see a lot of these hemp-derived businesses are going to be matriculating over into being micro businesses. And I think that's the one thing to keep in mind as we're having all of these conversations about the cost of preparing your application and starting your business and things like that, is that you'll see, when you look at how much the application and license fees are in the statute, that, you know, some have much higher application fees, and that is indicative of the fact that those are the types of businesses, those are the bulk businesses, laboratories and things like that, that in order to be successful, you're gonna need to have cash because it's infrastructure heavy. And so, you know, making it so that there's no cost barrier to applying is a potential issue for the state in terms of capacity for you know, functioning capacity for businesses at that level. But what you'll notice is with micro businesses, with some of the other, you know, licensed categories, the application fees have been kept intentionally very low. These are intended to be smaller businesses. The budgets for these businesses are therefore anticipated to be smaller, and so cost and investment should not inherently be a thing that scares people off from operating in this industry and even being licensed operators in this industry. Because there are specific license categories that were set up to be accessible and more open, including to more non-traditional type applicants. So that's a good reason to connect with people in the local industry, especially those that have been operating in the hemp-derived side. There's just a wealth of knowledge that they can give you in terms of the actualities of setting up such a business here in Minnesota. Especially do that.
Yeah, great, thank you. I know we're just about out of time, so I want to close with some friendly reminders. Number one is you're not behind. If people are telling you you're behind, you're not behind, there's still time. The other piece is speculating can be dangerous, it can be exhausting. There's a lot of stuff out there, and I would just really advise patience. You know, choose your sources wisely. So you know, pay attention to news sources that are trusted in this space. And it is difficult to navigate compliance. So start getting yourself educated on compliance, on your business model that you might have, about how you might operate your business in general, because it's just like at the end of the day, it's like any other business. It's cannabis, but it is a business too. So just think about that, and you're gonna do great.